Hey, good morning, everyone. It's good to see you all, and glad that we are back on normal schedule. And let's not jinx it, but we're happy that the computer is working properly. Um, 2 weeks in, that's impressive. Okay, so we are up to page 196, day 64, and this is sort of the last of. Sorry, wrong page. We are up to page 204. Sorry, my pages moved around a little bit. Page 204, day 67. And this is really sort of the last of this group of questions that we dealt with regarding this idea of if someone asks you something regarding over here, they're talking about for a shidduch, for a match. But it's referring to really for anything, right? If one asks you regarding information about someone or something like that, what you're allowed to say, what you're not allowed to say. And this is sort of the last one, just to sort of put in the three different scenarios. Let's talk about this, and then we'll sort of do a wrap up for these three different categories. So the scenario they have over here, and each one, again, it's just a scenario. The scenario they have over here is your friend reveals to you that he is dating this young woman, or vice versa, this young man, and you'll probably soon become engaged. When he or she tells you, right, her or his name, right, you recognize it as a name of someone either you were in school with, or your friend was in school with, or whatever it is. Again, it's just, or it's a neighbor, right? Whatever the scenario is, they just created it and just to put it out there, right? That this person, this individual, boy or girl, whoever we're dealing with, right, had seizures, right? Had to leave school for a couple months because of seizures or other medical, either another medical thing, right? Not just, I had bad colds, right? But something that is significant, like a seizure, or if it's diabetes or something like that. Again, diabetes is very treatable. Seizures also, that is, we're not talking about something that is deathly, that is uncurable, things like that, right? But something that, but it's a significant thing. It's a life structure. It's living in a certain way. So now, do you know if your friend knows about this, right? And should you find out a way to make sure he knows about this, right? You don't know if he knows about it. He didn't mention anything. So how do you find out if he knows about it or she knows about it, right? And if they don't know about it or you're not sure, should you say something? Should you not say something? How to say something, right? So we're in a difficult situation over here. They're definitely more serious. And just to sort of break it down, there's 2 points over here, and then I want to hear what your thoughts are. And number one, on one hand, like we mentioned before, and if you start reading the answer, which I'm sure you all did, right? Let's be honest, that's what we do, right? It speaks about what we spoke about, we expanded on last week, the concept of do not stand aside while your friend's blood is being shed. Right now, again, it's an idea, right? If you see someone that might get hurt, something might happen, whatever it is, right? We have to, right? We have to make sure not to stand aside, and make sure that they're taken care of, right? So on one hand, this is definitely something to reflect on, right? On the other hand, right? There's how much is it your responsibility to? How far are you supposed to say? Maybe they don't have it anymore. Maybe they took you. Maybe it was a temporary thing, and things happen like that. Maybe they are on, there was something that was triggering these seizures, and then they took care of it, and now they're fine. And if you bring something up, that not necessarily is an issue anymore, right? You might open up a whole can of worms. And number three, if it is something that might be an issue, there's another idea of, if they're serious already, as we mentioned before, it is incumbent upon the individual to reveal certain information to the person, right? So did they reveal that information? Did not reveal that information. By saying something, you are automatically assuming, or you have that concern, and that did not reveal something, right? So these are sort of all different, scenarios one has to think about, that when they're considering this decision. So, guys, what do you think? Anybody? No one? Go ahead, Martha.
I'm just thinking, they're already like they've been dating and they're ready to be engaged. It's kind of late in the time, and maybe consulting the rabbi, maybe he knows, or what's the, I was going to say, or she knows, maybe he knows more in depth, that something's been revealed and that it's been taken care of before you open your mouth and say something.
Okay, good. So, that's very good. Let's hear if anybody else has anything to say, and then we'll expand on some of the things you said. Anybody else?
I don't know what page we're on, so I didn't look at the answer. It
just seems 204, but okay.
Okay. Well, okay. So you're the shot, like you're not a shotgun, you're just a friend.
No, you're just a friend.
That seems like so none of your business. Like, I feel like that's so wrong. I don't know. It just seems like that's their, it's not, we're not talking about like somebody verbally abusive or physically abusive. Like someone's medical condition is between the couple. That's nowhere. Like, I don't know.
Let me ask you like this. If God,
like if someone was,
God forbid, and it shouldn't ever happen, but let's say let's just someone very close, right? Or whatever it is. And they something comes out later and they found out that you knew something, or you found out someone knew something, they didn't reveal it to you, and you could have avoided all this headache, right? And something, that's significant. You don't think that, you would say like, you could have given me heads up, this is a medical condition. It's something that, you're right. It's a privacy thing, but, it's also, now I have to worry about my friend, about you, right? You're my friend. I'm not saying yes or no. I'm just saying.
I think that's like between the couple. Like if you're, again, like if someone's going to be harmed, I think that it's absolutely.
They will be harmed. They'll be harmed. Their marriage will be harmed. They'll be harmed. His life will be harmed. Maybe he didn't want to sign up for a life of having to go to the hospital all the time. If he would have known that, he would have. It's not a physical harm, right? But he or she would be harmed in a style of life. Which is, we're not talking about, do you have a 10-bedroom house or a 5-bedroom house? All right, we're talking about a lifestyle where, the whole, what happens if someone couldn't have kids, right? Would that be something that you have to say? Where do
you draw the line?
So, right, what happens if someone is, there's a lot of different scenarios. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying, right, saying a blanket statement like that is, just because it's medical condition, it is a private thing, but now that you are involved with someone else, it's not that private because the other person has to be aware of it. The person should reveal it, but the person has to be aware of it. I mean,
I'd be shocked if someone didn't tell their fiance that this was an issue. Like, that's just, I don't know. Like, how is that not something that you disclose? Maybe.
Oh no, for sure. That's something that you should definitely disclose 100%. Right. And that's part of the question. How do you find out if your friend knows about this or not? Or do you have to be concerned? And that's part of the question. Let's say for sure that the friend doesn't know about it. Right. So then, we're not talking about that. We're talking about we don't know, or you don't know also. Right. So, and that's what I said, that's part of the trickiness of this case. It really allows us to delve into different parts of it. Number one, right? Do you have to assume, or do you have to be concerned that he doesn't know or she doesn't know? Right. And is that part of the calculation, cheshbon, the calculation that you have to deal with? Right. How far do we take? If you know for sure they don't know, so then it's a different scenario. And you know for sure they don't know, right? How do you know for sure they don't know? It's a good question, right? But for sure they don't know. So then that's a different thing. Then there's probably a stronger obligation to say something. But again, how to say it is important also. But if you don't know if they know, they don't know, right? So then by saying something, you might just bring something up that they already are aware of and they dealt with, and now you bring it up again. This makes it sound more severe, right? But they already were known. So there's more to the story than they're not. If you know for sure they don't know, again, how do we know for sure we don't know? We don't know, right? Because Yeah, just because they didn't tell me, they don't want to reveal that to you. They just because they don't know that you know, and therefore they don't want to talk. Maybe they're not that close. Even they're extremely close. That, as you said, medical things are private, and they'll deal with it, right? But if you know somehow for sure that they don't know, so then that's a different story, right? That's a different story where you might be more prudent to say something where if you don't know for sure. It's a good question.
I mean, sorry, I'll say one more thing. I know that Suzanne wanted to say something, but maybe you could just say, like, have you guys talked about, medical things between the two of you?
Okay, good. So that's a good suggestion. Very good. That's a good suggestion.
Kind of like, be like, oh, did you guys discuss your medical backgrounds or
Right. Okay, that's a very good that's a very good suggestion. That's a very tactful way to bring the topic up, right? And sort of make the individual, your friend, aware of that this is something important. And they might say, yeah, of course we dealt with this. And yeah, we were honest with each other and we talked with each other. Or I'd say, yeah, no, medical, what? No, it's not, I don't have to worry. He or she looks healthy, they're fine. Right. So then yes, maybe that's a way of knowing if they know. It's a very good idea, very tactful. Suzette?
Good morning. So I think that things that are protected, medical information is private, but I think the test that I apply to myself is it my story to tell? And if it's not my story to tell, then I just don't think it's my place to ask. And I leave it at that. So I guess I disagree with the conclusion drawn in the book. But I just don't think that it is my place to ask. So I would not have mentioned anything.
But if you talk to the rabbi and you let the rabbi know you have a concern, he can deal with it and take yourself out of it so your friend doesn't feel like you're delving into his private life.
How I see it though is I just think that you open, it can be endless. I mean, it's this today, but what would it be tomorrow? And I just think that certain things should remain private. And I do not really see how that sense of responsibility of that person's medical condition or disclosure really extends to someone who is not a part of that intimate relationship.
So just so that you're 100% correct. Privacy is something very important and something that we hold very dear to our hearts. It's in the Torah also, right? That's really lashon hara, rechilus. Rechilus is something that's true, right? Saying something that is doesn't need to be said, doesn't need to be revealed, even if it's true, right? We have laws for not only if it's not true, even if it's something that it is true, and that's why we're having the discussion about this because privacy and being careful what we say and what we reveal, right, is something that we hold very dear and something that's very important. At the same time, right, we also have a responsibility to make sure that we're not allowing the other individual to get hurt. So if it's something that's just for the individual and it doesn't affect anybody else, then you're correct. And we're not talking about doctors, whether it's HIPAA laws and things like that. We're talking about a friend that is aware of something, right? That's a whole different legal problem, which halacha is concerned about, of course. So we have to be concerned about the laws of the land and things like that. We're talking about something that a friend knows and everybody in the community knew at that time. It happened years ago, or, something that you're aware of because of whatever. Now, I'm not saying it yes or no. I'm just saying the debate is, right, and we'll see the answer in a minute, right? The debate is over here that, yes, privacy is something that's very important, but at the same time, right, we also have the responsibility to make sure that when someone walks into something, right, they're not harmed also. And if this medical condition will harm that individual, right, and in not, as I told Emily, right, not necessarily only in a physical way. We're not talking about anger issues or, abusive issues, right? That I think we'll all agree because it's a physical thing and the person will get harmed. Let's say someone's God forbid, a child molester, right? So, that's something that, yes, I'm going extreme, right? But that's something that, that is, privacy is important, but there's also important of keeping other people safe, right? Someone has a bad rap of petty theft or whatever it is. There's certain things that we understand that that's harmful to other people, and therefore we have to be made the person aware of. But even in that scenario, it has to be only if it's going to harm the person, right? If someone's, God forbid, and I'm sorry for being an extreme case, but someone's a child molester and they move into a non-kids community, right, where no kids are even allowed in, right? So there's no need to tell the people there that he's a child molester, right? Because none of them have kids. They're not only allowed to bring their grandkids in, and that's the rules of this location. So I'm just saying, in that scenario, right? So then, yes, even that extreme thing, right? But that's a private thing, and it's a bad thing. It's a terrible thing. Hopefully, the person's repenting and changing. But desires are desires, and it's a terrible thing. I don't want to get sidetracked on that, right? But at the same time, if there's no concern of anybody getting affected by that, right? So then there's no reason to tell people, right? I went to an extreme case to show that there is that scenario, but when we have a concern that someone will get hurt, and that is also that their life, they're going into something, right, expecting something, and they're gonna have a whole different life. If it is a problem that they're gonna have to go to hospitals and they're gonna have to this and doctor's appointments and things like that, and if they truly love each other and he's aware of it or she's aware of it ahead of time, said, listen, I love the person and I think this is my best shirt, this is the right person, and I want to make a family, and I'm willing to go into all that. That's great. But if they don't, first of all, it'll be harmful to both of them for their marriage, because secrets are never good when you go into a marriage, right? That's number one, right? And number two, right? You're also allowing this person to get harmed and hurt. So yet, right, we are very concerned about medical and all privacies, right? But at the same time, there is that concern that we have to be also responsible not to allow, we don't want that person to get hurt that has that privacy, the medical, we don't want them to get hurt that people know about their privacy, but at the same time, we don't want this person to get hurt also that might be affected by that, right? Let's say someone that's going into business with someone that's a world-class cheater, right, in business, right? And they've been, they've done they've cooked the books and done this and done that, and this person is straight hours, not interested in any of that stuff, but this person doesn't know, and he's a little naive, right? He or she's a little naive about that. They're just good, straight shooter. They see people always for the best, right? So then, again, we might have to tell the person that person, I don't think it's the best thing for you to go into business with that. How do we say it? How to make sure that we're not, saying the person that maybe he changed, maybe he didn't. Those are good questions, right? But this, again, back to our discussion that we spoke about last week a little bit, and we have a responsibility to also to protect people that might get hurt from people that we're trying to protect also with their privacy. And that's sort of the balance that we're trying to tread over here. Does that make sense, Suzette?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Go ahead.
I have a follow-up question.
Please.
The kind of question. Does the rabbi see the couple before he performs the marriage? And do you discuss those kinds of things with the couple?
So it really, most of the times rabbis do see the couple before they get married. It happened to be the rabbi that married me and my wife was my Rosh Yeshiva, right? My head of the Yeshiva. He did not meet us ahead of time, right? But he relied on knowing our families and knowing who we are, and that we were good and healthy people, and we checked into things. But a lot of times they do, and sometimes they don't. It just really depends on the environment and which rabbi and how it's being done. Me personally, if I would marry people and are a fish, definitely meet the couple ahead of time. But be it at they meet ahead of time or not ahead of time, I think what we were saying, like, what Emily was saying, and Martha, what you were saying in the beginning, right? We have no reason to read the paragraph. I think you already took a look at it, and we talked about some of the things already in there, but sort of just to bring it out again, this is something that has to be walked very, very tight, tightrope. How to walk it, how to make sure that you don't on one hand reveal something that you don't not supposed to. On the other hand, also not judge someone unfavorably by saying that they didn't reveal it, right? Because don't forget you're doing that too. By saying something, you're also judging the other side, saying that they didn't say anything, right? Because you don't know for sure that they didn't say anything, right? And you don't know if it's something that's really a problem now. And just because something was back then, we're not talking about something that happened 2 days ago. Now we're talking about something that happened years ago, and it could be it's not an issue anymore. Right, so one always has to make sure that they weigh all options, right? And therefore, yes, this is a scenario where it's best not to go ahead directly to speak to the individual, right? Speak to someone that is aware of the situation, either if it's a rabbi or the shotgun, the matchmaker, right? If they had one, that to say, hey, listen, I know you're, dealing with this case, and you should. I don't want to make any trouble. I just, my dear friend, and are you aware? Were you aware of this, or is it, if it's still a problem, whatever it is, or as I said, speak to a rabbi, and it is something that is difficult, but something that has to be brought up in one way or another, right? And yes, the rabbi probably would say something like, "Oh, did you check out, speak to the person, either a girl or boy, or if it's her Rebbitzin, or someone that she's close to, or someone that he's close to, and say, how's it going, blah blah, talk about the date, and then bring up and said, oh, okay, it sounds like a wonderful girl, a wonderful guy, and I'm so happy for you, and it sounds like you're really moving along, just something to always be aware of, and not saying that it's a problem, God forbid, but medical things are always something important to always look into, right? And make sure that there's no medical things, something like that, like Emily, like you brought up, right? And in every scenario, there's no cookie cutter for this, right? Every scenario has to be done b'chachmaso, with his wisdom or with her wisdom, right? Talking to whoever is the one that's doing the helping out over here, right? To be done with wisdom, to make sure, right, that it's done in the proper way. And it's a touchy subject. And this is not only for this scenario, for other scenarios, right? As I said about, business partners, could be this happened years ago. Maybe the person changed, maybe not, right? Community people moving into communities, and something about the person, that how they were, 10 years ago, and there's always something that's coming up that one has to use their wisdom to make sure that on one hand, they're not judging the person, and they're not saying something negative about the person, but on the other hand, right, they're also making sure that they're not harming the person that might get affected by it. And it's not an easy thing. And I'll be honest with you, right? I wouldn't want to be put in such a situation. It's not easy. You're juggling a lot of different balls that have a lot of different moving parts that really have to be analyzed properly to make sure that you're giving the right information, the right amount of information, and saying it in the proper way. So we're not giving a cookie cutter answer over here, because there is no cookie cutter answer. But just to conclude this part, right? And then again, if anybody has any more questions on this, I'll be happy to answer. Then we'll move on. If you notice, there's like 3 different categories really that we're dealing with. Right. If you go back to where we started, right, on page 200, first we spoke about features, right? Tall, short, smart, not smart, personalities, right? Not anything really, it's something important, right? But it's not any, mental thing or physical thing or anything like that, right? Then we spoke about, right? Then we spoke about anger or sort of an attribute about someone. If they're kind, they're mean, they're anger, they're, they lose their control and things like that. And then we spoke about a medical thing. Something that's a medical, all right, either physical or emotional, right, or psychological, and emotional medical, is a concern too, right? If this person has breakdowns every once in a while, right? That's something, just because they're doing well right now, right? Doesn't mean to say that that's not a concern for the future, right? So it's sort of building it up, right? And of course, one is more severe than the other regarding what is your responsibility but also the delicateness of the situation, right? To say something that, oh, he's not that short, right? Or he's not that tall, right? Okay, yes or no, it doesn't really hurt someone. It's not, that's just the way they are. And, that's, but at the same, and then within that, there's, they're fat, God forbid, you should never use that word, right? But, they're more chubby or not. Again, there's nothing wrong with it. Me personally, I'm a little chubby, I'm a little bit, right? But, there's nothing wrong with that, but there's a certain perception of how things are, right? But that's not anything that's really severe, but at the same time, there's still rules, what you say, what you can say, all right? And then anger, how angry, how not angry, right? Or, stingy, or, not so friendly, or whatever it is, right? And that sometimes works also with who they're hanging out with, or, right? And then the medical thing. So it's sort of just building it up, just pointing it out, right? And again, this is just brought out in this sensitive scenario of shidduchim, right? But this plays out in all aspects of our lives when we're asked for references about someone, or if we have concerns about someone in shul, in school, in the community, business, or whatever, friendships. I was thinking of being friends with this person, right? It plays out in many different ways, but this, of course, is probably one of the most sensitive scenarios, because two people are committing for the rest of their lives together, we hope, right? So this scenario makes it so much more delicate. And that's why they brought it out in this case, to show the sensitivity of this. Any questions or comments before we move on?
I have one quick comment.
Go ahead.
It seems like with this type of thing that it's not always, what you would intuitively think you should do or not do. And so bottom line, just ask your rabbi, you know what I mean? It just seems like it kind of it's so complicated. It's so individual, each scenario, that it just, I think what I've learned from this class is just keep your mouth shut for the most part. But obviously with shidduchim, it's not so simple to keep your mouth shut. You don't necessarily want to keep your mouth shut, but then if you don't want to say something that you shouldn't say. So it just seems like bottom line, when you're dealing with shidduchim, which probably most of us don't deal with, it's not very common for most of us. But in the rare scenario that we would deal with shidduchim, it sounds like it's always just ask the rabbi. That seems like bottom line.
And you're 100% correct. Just a acute idea. Just to bring this point out, there's a famous story with Ramosha Feinstein. Ramosha Feinstein was one of the leading rabbis the leading rabbi of the Jews in till the 80s. He passed away in the 80s. His levaya was on Purim in Eretz Yisrael, and there's a disagreement between Moshe Feinstein and Chaim Noah, another great Torah sage, about the width of the straps of the tefillin. I don't want to get into the technical halacha of this, right? Scenario, and the Moshe Feinstein holds that it could be a little narrower, and Chaim Noah holds it should be a little wider. That's just to point that. Now, one of Moshe Feinstein's students was learning the laws, and this came up. They're talking about the laws of tefillin and the width and this and that, and so he said, according to Moshe Feinstein, there's no problem if it's a little thicker, right? And why not fulfill both people, right? If you have to just make it a little thicker. So he went to ask Ramosha, right? Now Ramosha doesn't care, that someone doesn't want to do the way he does, right? But Ramosha just pushed him away, right? So the student thought that maybe because he was a young student, so he got one of the more older, respected students, and he had come to, sounds like a good, what's the big? So he went to ask Ramosha Feinstein, and Ramosha Feinstein looked at him and he said, "Go tell that student, right? He says, when you come up to heaven and they ask you why you didn't have a thicker ritzua, the thicker strap, then I'll come and defend you." You're my student, right? You follow me, right? You're my student. I'll come and defend you. Right? He said, but when you come to heaven and they ask you, why don't you follow Rav Moshe Feinstein, your rabbi? Right? Rav Chaim Noah is not going to come and defend you, right? Because he's not you're not asking him. He's not your rabbi, right? He's not you're not thing. So, the point of the story is, right, and we find this happens, right, often, right, is that we have to make sure that we have a competent rabbi. Right now, it's upon us to make sure that we have a rabbi that's competent, right? Because we're going up to heaven and want our rabbi to defend us. We want to make sure that it's someone that actually could defend us, right? Not someone that themselves are in trouble, right? And doesn't know the law or pretends or whatever it is, right? And just throwing it out there, right? But we want to make sure that we have a competent rabbi because we want to defend it. But then you're 100% correct, right? We have a question. We're not sure about something. We go ahead and ask, right? Because it's a sure way to make sure that we know what's going on, right? And it used to be that way much more, right? We used to ask questions. Yes, we have a lot of options to read things, and we have basic rules through this, at least, and a lot of these books that are written about different laws, Lashon Hara or kosher, or whatever it is, a lot of them are to make you aware, right? I saw one introduction, I forgot which one, right? So that this is not for you this book is not instead of a rabbi. This is to make you aware of questions that you might not have thought of, right? That you should ask your rabbi, right? Because a lot of things that we're not even aware of. We're not even sure what that might be a problem, right? We're not even, aware that, putting these together, or whatever it is. So we're very lucky. We have a lot of books, and especially in English now, we have a lot of books that we could read and learn, right? But it's not instead of a rabbi. It's to give you that information, right, to be able to know even what to ask, right? Because sometimes people don't even know that. I had a discussion with someone a little while ago, right, just to throw out there, and it said, really, I didn't even know that was an issue. Like wasn't even aware of that, right? And knowledge is important. We only can ask based off the knowledge that we have, and that's why it's so important to learn more and to know more. But until you have a full grasp on the situation, right? It's important to go ahead and to have that conversation with the rabbi. If you have a question and you're not sure about something, at the end of the day, you come up to heaven. So that's what my rabbi told me, and he's a competent guy. Take it up with him, right? Yeah, 100%. You're right, and I'm glad that that's one of the takeaways, because that is something very important to remember, right? That we don't know, we don't have all the answers, and I've told this to people. I know people have asked me sometimes questions, and I say, I'll get back to you. I have to go speak to my rabbi, right? There are different levels of questions, and I know there's plenty of things that I have to, ask, because it's either the situation or the scenario, the certain nuances, right? And I've many times, told people either if it's in halacha or hashkafa, philosophy, or whatever it is, how to interact with a certain individual or how to deal with certain things. There's plenty of times where I called up my rabbi / my father or my rabbi, depends who, right, and asked them for advice on how to deal with a certain situation or a certain thing, right? Because I don't know everything either, right? So it's important that is 100%. It shouldn't be abused in the sense of like, if you know what the blessing for a fruit is, right? You don't have to call the rabbi every time and say, hey, apple, we make a bar pre age, right? Right. So, it's not, it's to use the things that you don't know, right? And as we learn more, there's certain things, more things that we know, right? And more things that our questions change, right? Because as I said, you have more knowledge. Now you have different types of questions because that you can mix milk and meat together, and that a pan that has been used for milk, might be considered milk, right? So now since you learned that, so now when you by mistake made chicken in that pan, now you have a question. So the rabbi will ask you how long, or this or that. There's a lot of different scenarios, but now you even know that you have to ask that question, right? Not to do that, but if by mistake. So questions constantly evolve, also based on the knowledge that you have, because you have more information, and so you might have more questions. So very good point, Emily. Thanks for bringing that up. Anybody else? Okay, so just to answer Martha's question, I don't know if you put it on chat for everybody or just to everyone.
I did put for everybody. My bird was really loud. I wasn't going to ask. Now she quieted down a little.
Right.
was
So,
wondering why
you
it's-
want to know why is this grudges and forgiveness, right? Excellent. So just to the way this book works, right, is there's the halakha component, right? And the halakha component just continues, right, with different scenarios and different things. Right? And then there's the philosophy behind it of how we could try to overcome to the urge or to change our mindset of how to restructure ourselves, of how to be more aware of lashon hara, or to be more in control of lashon hara, right? So the different chapters give us the names of the chapters is more on growing the second page, right? The more of the hashkafa, the philosophy of it, right? So this chapter is dealing with the concept of forgiveness, and we spoke about last week, and we'll bring it out with today's message, which is a very powerful message. They're all very powerful messages, right? Of that, if one if you look at the read through the theme, and I'm just going to speak about it outside. The Ralbag, right? Ralbag was a tremendous commentary. He's primarily on Tanakh, on the prophets and the judges, right? But he also has commentaries on the Torah and things like that. And he speaks about Yosef HaTzadik, right? Yosef, right? Joseph, the righteous. He's known as Yosef HaTzadik, Joseph the righteous. Now, he had a lot of opportunity, and the opportunity is not the right word, but he had, he would have been, if he got angry at his brothers and lashed out at them, and held grudges against them, I think everybody would understand, right? He had a rough childhood, as we nowadays put it. He was sold into slavery. Right, his brothers did not really include him in the clan. Right, he had his mother died. He was accused falsely by the mistress of the house. Right, he had a rough time, and really all stemmed from his brothers. Right, because his brothers sold him into slavery, and his brothers never really accepted him, and they always poked fun at him. Now, he was a little to blame also by saying these dreams, but it doesn't compare, and we would all understand, right? Codify it as emotional distress or childhood, whatever, and we'd have all these psychological terminologies, right, to explain why Yosef, if he would have lashed out on his brothers, why he did that. But instead, what does Yosef do? Yosef does not lash out at his brothers. When his brothers find out who he is, right, and they ask him for forgiveness.
Hey, how you doing, Morris?
So look at the Ralbag, right? The Ralbag explains that Yosef tells his brothers, right? If you don't mind muting yourself, thank you. Right? Instead of saying, I don't forgive you, and I'm going to try to kill you, and all that stuff. Right? What does he say? Instead, he says that Hashem was in control of the situation at all times. I fear Hashem, right? That's who I fear, right? I fear Hashem, and it's Hashem ani yireh, right? God I fear, and he had a plan, and he had a reason why this all happened, right? That's what Yosef HaTzadik said, right? And the Ralbag points out that someone who refers to forgiveness, someone who refuses to forgive someone who has sincerely asked for forgiveness, right, is considered cruel, not righteous. He may adore, but when a person who's cheating him comes to make amends, right, the high road and the righteous act is to forgive, right? And meaning to say like this, right? What the idea of controlling ourselves, right? The idea of really realizing that there's a higher power, the idea of controlling our anger, lashon hara, starting to talk about other people, is the need to a lot of times, sometimes it's you like gossip, and we spoke about that, the need to love every person, and we spoke about after kamok, and we spoke about it in previous chapters. But this one is someone that has done you wrong. You want to say someone did something wrong to you, someone crashed into you and ran off, and you know who it is, right? Someone dumps their garbage on your front lawn all the time, right? Someone does this, and they talk rude to you, they whatever it is, right? They do something to you, right? Sometimes bad, right? Sometimes not so bad, sometimes bad. And you want to just lay it out. You want everybody to know, right? Because everybody should know what kind of person this person is, right? So that's lashon hara or rechilus, if it's true, right? Whatever it is, we just sort of codified under lashon hara. That's the more terminology that we know, right? Is used, right? But if you are able to control your anger and realize and forgive the individual, again, we spoke about forgiveness doesn't mean to say that you're not hurt. Forgiveness doesn't mean to say that you're not going to be weary about the person. And forgiveness doesn't mean to say that the person should go scot-free if there's a financial damage or whatever it is. But forgiveness means to say that internally you realize, right, that you have to be bigger and better, and there's a plan why things happen, right? The person had the freedom to do what they did, but at the end of the day, something that happens to you, it's Elokim ani yireh. I fear God, and therefore I'm going to control my anger. I'm going to purge anger from myself, right? Because I believe in a higher power. I believe in something bigger and better. And by being able to forgive the person, you will be able to control the urge to want to talk about that person. Because if you forgive them, right, you don't need to say negative things about the person anymore. So just to quickly answer your question, Martha, right? That's why the names of the chapters are, if you go back, right, you'll see they're all talking about different ideas to how to one, work on themselves, knowing the halacha is one part, but then also working on oneself of how to perfect ourselves, make ourselves better people, to be able to not have that urge or control ourselves when we have that urge. And I know I'm using the word urge, it's not necessarily your urge, but that desire or whatever it is, or just the need or the anger or whatever scenario, wherever it's coming from, and one of the ways is by forgiving people that have done you wrong, and if you forgive them, right, then you are able to, you don't need to talk about that person. Let's just the quote of the day, right? He who is slow to anger is better than the mighty person, and the ruler of his spirit is better than the conqueror of a city, right? King Solomon said this in Mishlei, right? Whoever is slow to anger means to say that they're able to be in control of themselves and realize that there's a high power, and realize that there's a grander purpose to the world, and realize that there's, yes, that individual did it, and they might have to pay for it or whatever it is, but at the same time, you have to be slow to anger, right? That is stronger than a mightier person, and that whose control of his spirit means to say his feelings, his way of doing things, is stronger than better than a conqueror of cities, right? So I think that's a great quote to end the day with. Thank you all for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you all next week on Shabbos. Remember, we're back open. We have classes going on at 10:15ish during davening. We have nice kiddushes, so please, we look forward to seeing everybody back in shul. Everybody have a wonderful day.